Hey guys, tonight's episode is a quiet reminder that time may be linear, but aging is not. Tonight, we're stepping into a world where 25 wasn't just an age, it was a diagnosis. A time when your knees were older than your parents, and being called young man meant you still had all your teeth. We're exploring why 25 in the Middle Ages felt a lot like being 70s today, if 70 came with more fleas and fewer rights. Before we start, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Not because you're told to, but because your ancestors didn't have the option. And if you're up for it, comment below with how old you are and how old your back feels. We're all aging together, some just faster than others. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft medieval wind tunnel ambience. Let your shoulders drop, and let's quietly descend into the kind of exhaustion that starts in your bones and never leaves. Congratulations, you've just turned 25. Not today, not in your heated apartment, not on a birthday Zoom call, not while pretending you still relate to 19-year-olds on TikTok. You've turned 25 in the year 1348, and in case you're wondering, yes, that's the year the Black Death kicks off. But don't worry, you're probably not going to die of plague. That would be too easy. You've made it all the way to 25. Which means, statistically, you've already survived 3 childhood fevers, 2 winters without boots, and at least 1 ill-advised mushroom. You've beaten the odds. You're not youthful. You're a miracle. Your village priest calls you blessed. Your neighbour calls you old one. And your knees call you a traitor. At 25, in medieval terms, you're not a promising young adult with a full life ahead of you. You're halfway to being forgotten. If this were today, you'd be retired, hunched over in a sunroom, sharing war stories about the time your cousin got struck by lightning while stealing turnips. But you're still working, because rest is for the dead. And you're not quite there yet. Let's break this down. When we say 25 was like 70, we don't mean it felt older in some poetic, nostalgic way. We mean your body is already breaking. Your back hurts. Your skin is thin. Your joints pop like firewood in a wet hearth. You creak. You shuffle. You grunt involuntarily when standing up. And it's not just the bones. You've buried siblings, children, friends. You've watched people die of things you can't pronounce. You've seen teeth fall out like bad dreams. You've watched entire fields go fallow and entire families disappear overnight. Your idea of tomorrow is basically, try again, maybe don't get dysentery this time. You don't own a mirror. But if you did, you'd see a face so sun-damaged, so wind-worn, so furrowed and fatigued, that it wouldn't scream mid-20s. It would whisper, grandfather. Even your expression has changed. You no longer look surprised, just resigned. You've smiled exactly 4 times in the last year. Once when your goat didn't die. Once when your bread rose properly. Once when you had a full bowel movement, and once when your cousin Agnes finally stopped talking about her prophetic dreams. And society agrees. No one celebrates your 25th birthday. There are no candles, no cake, no medieval balloon animals shaped like pigs. Your 25th birthday is more like a checkpoint. A quiet pat on the back followed by another assignment. Happy quarter century. Here's a pile of turnips and a leaky roof. You remember being 10. That was the year you started working in the fields full time. You were given a tiny rake, a warning about snakes, and a nod of approval that would serve as your only performance review for the next 15 years. At 15, you were expected to marry, or at least procreate with enthusiasm. At 18, you'd likely already fathered or birthed a child, possibly two. At 21, you'd fought off some kind of local raid, or livestock stampede, or marital dispute involving a pitchfork. By 25, you've done it all. You've survived childbirth, yours and someone else's. You've seen wars, famines, and taxes. You're not in your prime, you're in your pre-finale, and no one cares how you feel about it. There's no concept of a quarter-life crisis, no time to reinvent yourself, no sabbatical, no backpacking trip through 14th century Tuscany to find your purpose. You are your purpose. You are the hands in the field, the back under the yoke, the mouth that eats just enough to keep working, and not enough to be a burden. Your existential dread is less, who am I? And more, what just bit me? You're not contemplating meaning. You're dodging rodents. And that's what identity means at 25, in the Middle Ages. Not aspiration, not ambition, but survival with a name tag. You don't have a resume. But if you did, it would be simple. Years alive, 25. Skills, not dead yet. Hobbies, not applicable languages, Latin prayers and vague screaming references. Probably dead. And yet, you're considered lucky. Respected even. Not for what you've accomplished, but for having the audacity to not be buried yet. People point you out at the market and whisper, that one saw 2 harvests without frost. Your body is a weathered monument, a piece of living history that limps. You're not admired for wisdom. You're admired like a rock formation, still standing despite everything. That's the reality. In today's world, 25 is the beginning of things. You're figuring yourself out. In the Middle Ages, 25 is the after party. Everyone's left, the candles are low, and someone stole your only wooden spoon. This is not the dawn of adulthood. This is its dusk. You wake up tired. Not the kind of tired you can fix with sleep. The kind that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. You slept on straw in a corner of a room filled with 3 relatives, a goat, and the vague smell of regret. The floor is damp, the air is cold, and your hip clicks when you roll over. Again. You don't stretch when you rise. You unfold. Slowly, carefully, like parchment someone left near the fire. Your body no longer negotiates with you. It just offers ultimatums. Move now, or cramp later. Lift that bucket, or twitch in the night. Your muscles, what's left of them, feel like they've been marinated in vinegar and betrayal. You are 25, and your back has declared independence. There's a knot in your shoulder you can't reach, can't name, and can't remember not having. It feels sentient, possibly evil. You hobble toward the door like a much older person. You don't know what sciatica is, but you've met its ghost, and no one bats an eye. Because this is normal. You're surrounded by other 20-somethings who look like they've been peeled off a battlefield. Everyone limps. Everyone squints. Everyone groans when they sit and when they stand. Old age isn't coming. It's here. It's just badly dressed. The young are those under 10. The rest of you are just different shades of pre-burial. You wash your face with water colder than betrayal and try not to scream. Cold shocks the system awake, yes, but also reminds you that your system is held together by sheer stubbornness and goat grease. Your hands are cracked, not weathered. Cracked. They've bled from rope burns, from splinters, from trying to pull frozen wood from a shed door in February. Your fingernails are chipped, not from climbing cliffs or sword fighting, but from peeling root vegetables that may or may not be edible. You learn to stop asking. Your knees no longer bend. They announce their arrival, loudly, like rusty hinges on a cathedral door. There's a growing suspicion in your lower back that your spine has changed shape. It curves where it shouldn't, bends where it never did, and sometimes it locks entirely, leaving you frozen like a garden statue no one asked for. You're not sure what cartilage is, but if it was ever there, it's now missing, possibly sold for salt, and through all this, you still have to get dressed. Clothing doesn't help. It only adds weight. Your tunic is wool, coarse, damp, and smells faintly of old stew. It clings to your shoulders like a judgment. Your shoes are made of leather so thin, walking on gravel feels like a religious experience. You slide them on. Your toes hate you instantly. You once joked that you were born tired. But the truth is worse. You were born briefly energized, then rapidly aged by chores, famine, and communal disappointment. Your identity is no longer about who you are. It's about what still functions. You're not John, the miller's son. You're the one who doesn't limp on Wednesdays. That's your reputation now. Not bravery, not strength. Just the minor miracle of mobility. At 25, your role in the village is established. You're not full of promise, you're full of back pain. Children ask if you remember the last eclipse. You do. It was 2 winters ago, and you cried when the sun came back, not from fear, but because it meant the chickens would lay again. You're not interested in dreams or ambitions anymore. That part of your brain was shaved down by endless repetition and the sound of pigs screaming in the morning. Now, your only dream is a fire that stays lit and knees that don't betray you mid-step. You once thought you might become someone. A storyteller. A builder. A person who knew things. Instead, you've become a cautionary tale. A walking example of what cold weather and hard floors can do to a spine before it even hits 30. You speak less now. Not because you've run out of things to say, but because your throat is tired. The air is always cold or filled with smoke. Your voice, once full of youthful complaints and bad songs, now rasps like wind through dead trees. And people listen differently too. Not like you're wise, but like you're proof. Proof that it's still possible to make it this far. That even with the cough, the limp, the pale skin, and half a molar, you're still technically alive. You're not asked for advice. You're asked for confirmation. Did it really hail turnips last year? Was the fever worse in the east? Did the baby ever stop crying? You answer with grunts, nods, or the quiet dignity of someone who has accepted that yes, this is the body you're stuck with now. At 25, you don't have posture. You have positions. Standing, sitting, lying down. All of them slightly crooked, none of them comfortable. Children don't respect you. They just step around you. Like furniture with a cough. Teenagers, if they exist, still pretend they'll live forever. They run without groaning, eat without chewing, sleep without curling into a ball of regret. They haven't earned their blisters. You see them and feel something between envy and pity. You want to warn them. To say, enjoy your cartilage while it lasts. But your voice gives out halfway through. So you just smile. That strange, tight-lipped smile people reserve for young people who are about to discover how bad things get. It's not bitterness. It's pre-trauma. Once, when you were 15, you saw a man who was 30. You remember it clearly. He walked with a stick, coughed blood into a rag, and had one eye that never quite pointed in the right direction. You thought he was ancient. You were wrong. He was just tired. Now you see yourself in him. You understand. You've become the figure people whisper about. He's 25. Can you believe it? Some say it with awe, others with dread, a few with curiosity, as if reaching that age unlocks a secret, like the last chapter of a grim story no one finishes. But there is no secret, no wisdom waiting, no reward, just more aching. And through it all, your body keeps inventing new ways to betray you. The rashes, the weird knee pop, the twitch in your eye that won't stop since winter. Every time you sneeze, something shifts. Every time you laugh, which granted is rare, you feel a nerve pinch in places laughter should never reach. Even sleeping is a gamble. You wake up more exhausted than when you passed out, covered in straw, stuck in a position that vaguely resembles being folded into a medieval suitcase. The dream of rest becomes just that. A dream. Your face tells the full story. The lines on your forehead aren't from age. They're from squinting at dark clouds, trying to guess if you need to pull the thatch in again. The bags under your eyes aren't from late night reading or binge watching anything. They're from waking up at every sound. The rats, the chickens, the unsettling silence that usually means something is about to catch fire. Even your teeth, what's left of them, hum with discomfort. They're not painful, just always present, like a bad decision you can't quite chew through. And when you smile, you feel them shift slightly, like passengers in a carriage with no wheels. Still want to blow out birthday candles? You don't remember the last time someone told you you've got your whole life ahead of you. Because here, life isn't ahead. It's behind. You've already done most of it. Worked, bled, mourned, loved a little, limped a lot. What comes next is more of the same, just slower, quieter, and slightly more hunched. The village doesn't expect anything new from you. Not growth, not revelation, just endurance. You are 25. You are who you are, and that will not change. There are no second acts in your story, only replays. The same field, the same tools, the same ache in the same shoulder every morning. You could get married, again, if your first spouse didn't survive childbirth, or winter, or just walked into the woods one day and never returned. You could raise children. If you haven't already buried some, you could try to dream. But the space in your mind where dreams once lived has been overtaken by thoughts of firewood, stew water, and whether that mole on your arm is spreading. And still you rise. Because what else is there? You've heard the stories of people who live to 40, even 50. You've never seen one. At least not upright. The local priest is rumoured to be 38, but he hasn't walked unassisted since the famine. And every sermon he gives sounds like a eulogy for his own liver. There's an old woman who may be 42, but no one's sure. She hasn't spoken since the windmill accident, and mostly just stares at the sun like it owes her money. These are your role models. These are your legends. People whose very survival feels like a dare. You think, maybe, you'll get there. You might not. But the real kicker is, at 25, no one's cheering for you to try. They're just watching, waiting. Your name is written nowhere. Not on any scroll, not in any ledger. You don't own anything except calluses and debt. Your legacy, if it exists, will be passed through rumour, exaggeration, and the shape of your limp. Remember that one? They'll say. The one who worked through the frost with a broken rib? That one who still had teeth at 26? That one who outlived 3 lords and 1 horse? You'll be a footnote in someone else's story. A background character in the oral history of another peasant family. And if you're lucky, your name will be passed down in a lullaby or an insult. Something the kids say when the stew burns or the chickens revolt. Your identity is not a legacy, it's a placeholder. So when you lie down at night, if the rats allow it, you don't think about what comes next. You think about what still hurts. You count the parts of your body that still respond when called upon. You hope tomorrow brings no surprises, no new lumps, no unexpected fevers. You hope for boring, for routine, for the predictable rhythm of a body slowly giving out instead of all at once. Because that's what 25 is in this time. It's not the start of anything, it's the quiet collapse of everything. You are not becoming something. You are enduring the becoming of decay, and somehow, despite all of this, you're still here. Tomorrow you'll wake up. Your knees will pop. Your back will ache. Your hands will twitch. And no one will notice, because to them, you're just 25. Same as old, just with slightly fewer funerals behind you. You weren't born into comforts. You were born into cold, into drafty walls and uneven floors, into the long, slow drip of damp wood and the slow suffocation of smoky air. You don't have furniture. You have objects that serve more than one purpose. The stool is also a table. The table is also a bed. The bed is also a coffin if someone doesn't get up soon. The walls aren't painted. They're stained with smoke, with mud, with memory. Every mark tells a story, and none of them are good. There's the scorch mark from the fire that nearly took your uncle's beard, the greasy shadow where your mother used to sit, the cracks where the frost crept in and never left. The hearth is the heart of the house, not because it's warm, but because it's the only light after sunset. The smoke it belches fills the room, stings your eyes, coats your lungs, and clings to your hair. You cough more now. You tell yourself it's just the weather. You know it's not. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that sometimes forgets to work. The air inside the hut is a thick soup of breathing and burning, stirred occasionally by a gust of wind that reminds you what real air once felt like. Outside, it's not much better. The ground alternates between too wet and too frozen. There's never a perfect day, only slightly less miserable ones. You walk with your shoulders hunched, not out of caution, but because the wind has taught you that standing tall invites suffering. Rain hits sideways. Snow finds your neck. Summer heat doesn't bake, it boils. Nature isn't romantic here. It's not peace. It's not beauty. It's competition. The rats eat your food. The insects eat your skin. The goats eat your clothes. The wolves eat your goats. Even the trees seem to lean in, whispering reminders that they could fall on you at any moment, and no one would hear you scream beneath the canopy. You don't walk through the woods at night. Not because you're afraid of monsters. You're too old for that. but because you're afraid of real things. Robbers, bears, broken ankles, unseen pits dug by hunters who forgot to mark them. The earth is alive here, but not in the way poets mean. It breathes through rot, pulses with decay, and moves constantly in slow, quiet shifts that swallow fences, flood paths, and pull carts sideways. Your environment doesn't support you. It tolerates you. For now. In the warmer months, you struggle with growth, weeds, pests, heat stroke. In the colder months, you struggle with survival, frostbite, rot, hunger. There's no off-season, no reprieve, no cosy winter break by the fire, just a different flavour of hardship. Your feet are never dry, your hands are never clean, your hair is never untangled. You smell of whatever task you did most recently. Fish, sweat, manure, or smoke. And the worst part, everyone else smells the same. No one notices anymore. You've gone past the point of embarrassment and landed in the soft, muddy realm of communal resignation. Inside your hut, the walls don't keep things out. They just slow them down. Wind, rain, insects, rodents, all eventual guests. You've patched holes with old cloth, stuffed gaps with moss, nailed animal bones into weak spots like primitive charms. It doesn't work, but it makes you feel like you tried. The roof leaks in 5 places. You know each one by the sound it makes. The drip over the corner sounds like a lazy frog. The one by the hearth is a sharper plunk, almost like a clock ticking towards some vague doom. The one that lands on your bed, that one's the worst. Not because it's cold, but because it always seems to know exactly where your face is. You shift in your sleep to avoid it. Eventually, you stop sleeping. Every day begins with the same sounds: coughing, creaking, scraping, cursing. The walls are thin. You hear your neighbours as clearly as you hear your own thoughts. One of them is already shouting about a missing chicken. Another is pounding something. Flour maybe, or rage. A baby cries. Then a louder baby cries in retaliation. There is no silence here. Only moments between sounds. Your ears ring when it's quiet. Your eyes sting when the sun hits them. Your skin burns if it's exposed too long, cracks if it's covered too much. The very air seems to alternate between too dry and too damp. As if the weather can't make up its mind about what kind of torture you deserve. Sometimes you fantasize about warmth. Not heat, not fire, just warmth. The kind that sinks into your bones instead of making your skin itch. The kind that doesn't come with smoke, or burns, or a stern warning from your father about wasting wood. You dream of blankets, soft ones that don't scratch or smell or come with fleas. But even in dreams, your brain doesn't believe it. The blanket turns to burlap, the pillow turns to straw. And you wake up in a bed that's soaked through from your own breath and last night's roof leak. You don't sigh anymore. You just exhale slower. You were born into this world, not a climate, but a sentence. The weather isn't something you discuss. It's something you survive. Rain doesn't fall. It invades. Crawling through every crack in your walls and seeping into your clothes, your mattress, your bones. The damp doesn't go away. It just moves around. From the floor to your socks to your spine. You've tried drying your clothes by the fire, but all that does is coat them in soot. So now you walk around, smelling like wet smoke and disappointment. Sunlight is rare, and when it comes, it doesn't warm. It scorches. It turns the hut into a slow cooker, baking every foul scent into the air until you can taste it. You sweat through your clothes, but taking them off is pointless. Modesty is expected. Skin is scandal. And besides, you need the layers. Not for comfort, for survival. They're your armour against the rats, the flies, the cold, the filth, and your own decaying skin. You look down at your hands. They're cracked, bleeding, permanently stained with dirt that no soap, if you had any, could remove. Your fingernails look like fossils, ridged, darkened, telling stories of every failed harvest and rough plank you've clawed. There's no ointment, no balm, no lotion, just spit, superstition, and the occasional prayer when the rash spreads. Sometimes you wrap them in old cloth. It doesn't help, but it makes the pain feel contained, and that's the best you can ask for. You haven't felt clean in years, not metaphorically, literally. Bathing is rare, too rare. Fetching water is labour. Heating it is luxury. Finding the time and privacy to soak without interruption is nearly impossible. The idea of cleanliness, of refreshment, of stepping out of water and feeling better, that's fiction. That's a fable told by rich people who haven't had to dig a frozen latrine pit at dawn. You once bathed in the river. Once it was spring. The ice had just melted. You thought it would be refreshing. Instead, it shocked your heart into silence and left your limbs aching for days. And when you stepped out, shivering, raw, gasping, you realised 2 pigs had wandered over and were eating your spare tunic. You went home wet and angry. You haven't bathed since. Even sleep is corrupted by the world you live in. The sounds outside don't stop. Wind howling through gaps in the roof. Chickens screeching. A dog barking at shadows. A neighbour moaning in their sleep, loudly enough to make you consider moving to the goat shed. And underneath all of that, mice. Rats. The constant scratching, chewing, whispering chaos of vermin nesting in your walls, your floor, your very mattress. You once swatted at a flea bite in your sleep, and woke up with your hand buried in straw and something small and very much alive wriggling under your palm. You screamed. No one came. Because screaming is normal here. It's how people say good night. And the smells are constant. They wrap around your body like another layer of clothes. There's no fresh air, just degrees of staleness. Inside the hut, you breathe smoke, sweat, stale ale, wet wool, and something that might be goat urine. Outside, it's worse. Dung, mould, decay, fish. You once walked past the baker's hut, a place you thought might smell like bread, only to discover that the yeast had gone sour, and the dough was crawling with flies. You vomited, quietly, into your sleeve, then kept walking, because that's what you do here. You adapt, you absorb, you endure. You don't fight the environment. You let it shape you. You let it gnaw on your edges until you fit the world that hates you. The world around you doesn't just affect your body, it reconfigures it. You walk differently now, not because someone taught you a better way, but because the paths themselves are trying to end you. The ground is uneven, full of soft spots and sudden pits. Roots jut out like medieval caltrops. Stones roll underfoot like invitations to ankle injuries. You used to sprint when you were a child. Briefly, naively. Now you step like a man who has fallen before. You lean to one side. Your right knee grinds when it rains. Your left foot has been swollen since last harvest. Your hip clicks when you move too quickly. But no one asks if you're okay, because everyone else is walking the same way. It's not a limp, it's the local style. Weather controls your schedule more than any clock ever could. There's no planning around it. You simply wake up, assess the sky, sniff the wind, and decide how much of your day will be lost to nature's moods. If it rains, your roof leaks and your chores double. If it snows, the doors freeze shut and you pray the pig doesn't die before morning. If the sun comes out, it dries nothing. It just makes the stink more vibrant. And if there's fog, you stay home, not out of superstition, but because someone always goes missing in the fog. Always. And the bugs, they don't just exist here, they dominate. You've stopped slapping them away. That takes too much energy. Now you just flick occasionally and hope they take the hint. Lice are permanent. You've named a few. Fleas are seasonal. They arrive with the warmth and leave with the rats, if the rats ever leave. Bed bugs are the most loyal. You can feel them shift when you lie down, like they're making room. There's no soap, no delousing powder, just ash, vinegar, and prayer. You've been bitten so often, your skin now itches in places that technically don't exist, like the memory of limbs or the ghost of last year's rash. You scratch without thinking, at meals, during church, while talking. It's less of a habit now and more of a nervous system feature, and people don't comment because they're scratching too. You've learned to tell time by decay, the colour of rot in the vegetable cart, the speed of mould on bread, the softness of meat that was hard yesterday. Your environment doesn't run on hours, it runs on expiration. You know your tunic is 3 seasons old, not because you kept track, but because it now falls apart if you breathe too hard near a splinter. You know winter is over when your shoes leak differently. You know the month by the texture of your pillow straw. And you know your own body is aging by how many extra steps it takes just to stand up without swearing. The air is thick, not with humidity, but with shared fatigue. It hangs between huts, low and heavy, like the collective sigh of a village that's been awake too long. You breathe it in, and with every inhale, you feel yourself being seasoned, softened, not like meat on a spit, but like leather, cracked, worn, left in the sun too long. Your environment isn't a place, it's a slow-motion punishment. It wears you the way waves wear cliffs. And by 25, you are no longer the shape you started as. You didn't age into this, you eroded, piece by piece. One bad night of rain, one poorly cured cut, one frostbitten toe, one summer of spoiled stew. There was no moment when you crossed from young to old, no candlelit birthday to mark the decline. It just happened. And it happened slowly until the world outside started looking like the one inside. Brittle, cracked, discoloured, and always about one sharp gust away from collapse. You don't live in a home. You live in a metaphor for your body, and both creak in the wind. You don't visit places, you endure them. The field isn't a patch of earth. It's a reminder that your back has limits. The woods aren't mystery, they're menace. The well isn't convenience. It's a daily gamble. And the sky, once the domain of dreams and gods, is now just weather. A looming, shifting dome of too much sun or not enough light. Rain that doesn't nourish. Clouds that hang too low. Stars that seem more like reminders of how far away peace really is. Even the moon mocks you. It glows soft and clean while you itch through another night in straw that smells like last week's dinner and next week's illness. You look up at it sometimes, wondering if people somewhere else are staring at the same moon from a softer bed. Then you feel a flea bite your ankle, and you stop wondering. At 25, the environment has left its mark. Not on your spirit, on your bones. Your spine bends in places that never used to bend. Your skin has hardened where it should be soft. Your joints speak in a language of cracks and resistance. And your face no longer fits your age. Children look at you and see grown up. Peers look at you and see slowing down. Elders, the few who still draw breath, look at you and see themselves, because they remember what it felt like to wake up at 25 and think, I'm still here, but just barely. There is no part of your environment that gives. Everything takes. The roof takes your warmth. The mud takes your footing. The path takes your balance. The well takes your strength. Even the fire, the one luxury you cling to, demands kindling you don't have, and time you can't spare. Nothing here is neutral. Everything you see, everything you smell, everything you touch, it all wants a piece of you. And after 25 years of giving pieces away, you've started to hollow. Your dreams, the few that visit now, are made of places you've never seen. They involve beds without bugs, doors that close, food that stays warm, hands that don't itch. You don't dream of riches. You dream of dry socks, of sleeping without waking up cold, of breathing without coughing, of standing up without cursing, of eating without flinching, and sometimes of silence, not death, not rest, just silence. A moment where the wind isn't shaking something loose, where nothing's leaking, nothing's burning, no one's shouting, no bugs, no bells, just stillness. But that's fantasy. That's not here, that's not now. Now is a splinter in your palm that won't come out. Now is frost creeping in under the door. Now is the slow bend of your back as you reach for another pot, another bundle of sticks, another day of walking through the same cold fog in a body that stopped bouncing back 5 years ago. Now is 25, but it feels like 70, because here the environment doesn't age you, it finishes you. You pass by the others on your way to the field. No one greets you. There's no need. You all live in the same rhythm. Beat down, bent forward, breathing heavy. A nod is enough. Anything more would require energy you don't have. One man is already limping. He tripped on a root last week, and his foot has turned purple. He still works. Because not working isn't an option. You don't get sick days. You get sick and then die, or recover while working. Those are your choices. A woman nearby is trying to lift a bale of hay. Her hands are shaking. She hasn't eaten properly in days. But no one helps. Not because they don't care, but because they can't afford to stop what they're doing. Everyone has a job. And if your job doesn't get done, someone else suffers or starves. This is what community looks like here. Mutual endurance, quiet suffering, and the understanding that help is a luxury. You find your row in the field. It's crooked. The soil is dry in some places, sticky in others. The land doesn't cooperate. It tolerates your tools like a lion tolerates a stick in its ribs. It growls but lets you keep going. For now. Your job is simple. Make the ground give up something it doesn't want to. Turn it over. Plant. Harvest. Repeat. Until your fingers go numb or your vision doubles. Then do it again. You've developed a technique. It's not efficient. It's not graceful. It's just the least painful way to lift, swing, drag, without dislocating your shoulder or collapsing entirely. Your back curves into itself. Your knees buckle slightly with every step. You feel the weight of your body like it's someone else's, and they're riding on your shoulders, laughing the whole time. You've never seen a doctor. If you did, he'd probably just bleed you and suggest leeches. So instead, you learn to live with pain the way you live with the weather. Always there, occasionally loud, never fair. You hear your joints more than you hear the wind. Every twist of your spine sounds like dry kindling. Every step is a negotiation between gravity and the promise of food later. You've broken 3 fingers in the past year. None of them healed straight. One points sideways now. It looks like it's accusing you of something. You use it anyway. Time doesn't pass in hours. It passes in tasks. Get the hay stacked. That's morning. Pull the weeds. That's early afternoon. Haul the water. That's what's left of the day before your arms stop working. The sun moves across the sky like a threat. Every degree higher means more sweat, more heat, more dizziness. Every degree lower means you're running out of daylight, and someone will shout if the job isn't finished before dusk. You eat with your hands while standing. Cold bread. The same lump of cheese you've been nibbling for 3 days. It tastes like it's fighting back now, but you eat anyway. You don't taste things anymore. You register texture, weight, the absence of hunger. That's enough. In the distance, someone drops a tool and screams. It's not unusual. It could mean anything. A crushed finger, a wasp sting, a twisted ankle. No one rushes over. They'll live, or they won't. Either way, the harvest won't wait. You remember being 12, watching the older men work, wondering why they moved so slowly. Now you understand. They weren't slow. They were just careful. Every movement was measured. Every lift calculated. Because one bad twist, one sudden strain, and you're out. Maybe permanently. At 25, you're already moving like one of them. There's a man in the village who used to run. He says so at least. Said he once outran a horse for a bet. Now he shuffles with a cane made from a broom handle and laughs every time his hip locks up mid-sentence. You think about him when your knee gives out during planting. You don't fall, but you see the ground rush up toward you for a moment. You steady yourself on the hoe. Laugh it off like a joke no one heard. You're not laughing inside. Inside, you're wondering how long until you can't get up at all. You don't remember what it feels like to not be tired. There are moments, brief ones, when your muscles go quiet, when your thoughts stop racing, when the pain dulls into something you can forget for a second. Usually right before you fall asleep, sitting up, head tilted like a broken marionette. But that kind of peace never lasts. The work finds you. It always finds you. Even on Sunday, your one supposed day of rest, you're repairing tools, or mending roofs, or helping someone else who's behind, because if they don't finish, it becomes your problem tomorrow. The priest says rest is holy. You believe him, but only because it's so rare, it must be sacred. Your version of rest isn't sleep. It's pausing long enough to feel how much everything hurts. Sometimes you work inside the village, mending fences, chopping firewood, patching holes in the walls of a hut that was already falling apart when your grandmother was a child. These jobs are less physical, but somehow worse, because they're reminders. Reminders that nothing stays fixed. You mend the same fence twice a month. You patch the same roof every season. You haul the same logs from the same collapsing pile that the rain keeps soaking. It's not improvement, it's delay. Delay of collapse, of decay, of disaster. Work here isn't about building something better. It's about keeping things from falling apart long enough for you to walk away before they do. You sometimes dream of other jobs, the ones people say are better. You've heard stories of scribes who spend their days writing on parchment with soft ink and don't lift anything heavier than a quill. You've seen a scribe once. His fingers were curled and his eyes nearly blind from squinting at letters. He coughed blood into a rag while copying a list of tithes. You've also heard of millers who grind grain in dark stone buildings that smell like wet dust. They work in shadows with machines that bite if you touch them wrong. Or coopers bending wood into barrels, breathing in smoke, scraping splinters from their hands every hour. One of them in your village has only 6 fingers left and insists he's lucky. There are no easy jobs, only different kinds of damage. Your arms go numb sometimes. Not completely, just enough to make you drop things. You tell yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself it's cold. You tell yourself it's nothing. Because if it's not nothing, then what? There's no healer, no herbs, no help, just more work. And if you can't lift your arms, someone else will, and take your place. And once you've been replaced, you don't come back. You've seen it. The slow fade of people who stopped being useful. They sit more, they speak less. They disappear without fanfare. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they just stop being part of the village's memory. You wonder how many people still remember that boy who used to race across the field when you were 10. The one who twisted his ankle one winter and never quite walked the same again. You wonder if anyone remembers his name. You push through the afternoon with your sleeves soaked in sweat, even though the sun has disappeared behind the clouds. You've had to take breaks, not out of laziness, but because your hands won't close around the hoe anymore. You rub them together until they remember how to work, until you remember how to force them. Every tool you touch leaves a new mark, a blister, a bruise, a line of splinters under your fingernails. You don't pull them out anymore. You wait until they rot and push their way out on their own. And when that happens, you call it healing. No one tells you to slow down. No one says, take it easy. The idea of moderation doesn't exist here. Not in food, not in pain, not in work. You stop when your hands won't close. You sit when your vision blacks out. You rest when you faint. Not before. Because stopping looks suspicious. Resting looks indulgent. Laziness is a sin here. Even children don't get away with it. A 5-year-old drops a bucket and someone mutters, he'll be useless by 10. You were that child. You've never forgotten. You know people are watching you, not out of concern, but because you're being measured. Every missed chore, every slow movement, every extra pause, someone sees it. Someone notes it. It might be the steward, the man who reports to the Lord how much grain you harvested, how many hours you spent on the ridge, how quickly you got back after your cousin's funeral. Or it might be your neighbour who needs the same patch of pasture and is hoping you slip behind just long enough to take your place. Or maybe it's your own family, the ones who love you, but also need you functional. If you fall, they don't have the strength to carry your share. So you keep moving, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because here, effort is currency. And if you stop spending, you stop mattering. There are no pensions, no retirement. You work until your body makes the decision for you. There was a man who once tried to stop working at 40. He said he'd done enough. He sat on a bench for 3 days, staring into the forest like he expected it to thank him. On the 4th day, no one brought him food. On the 5th, someone else took his place in the fields. By the end of the week, he was gone. Not dead, just erased. Some say he walked into the hills. Others say he froze. One person claimed they saw him in another village selling turnips with a broken arm and no shoes. No one knows. No one asks. Because when someone stops working, they stop being real. You can't even fake rest. There's no pretending you're injured unless you're bleeding or unconscious. Your complaints mean nothing unless they come with visible wounds. Even then there's skepticism. You could show someone your bruised ribs and they'll say, at least they're not broken. You could cough blood and they'll say, better out than in. Pain is treated like exaggeration until it kills you. And once it does, well, at least now you can stop working. You once tried to take a short break behind the shed. Just 5 minutes. A breath. A moment without pressure. You sat on a rock, closed your eyes. Someone passed by and said nothing, but the next morning, your sister told you the steward had asked if you were ill. If you could be replaced. That was 2 years ago. You haven't taken a break since. Now, you only sit when your legs stop moving on their own. You work until your mind detaches from your body and floats behind you like a ghost, watching you ruin yourself. And you don't cry about it, because crying takes water, and you need that for tomorrow. The sun begins to drop, but there's no celebration, no relief. There's still work to do, always. You still have to haul the last bundle of sticks from the edge of the wood. Still have to fill the water buckets. Still have to tie up the livestock, assuming none have wandered off or gotten sick. Still have to mend the fence where the pig broke through again. You'd scream if you had the energy. Instead, you mutter a prayer to no one in particular and drag your body forward like it's wearing itself. By now your shoulders feel like they've been dislocated and badly reattached. Your spine doesn't bend anymore. It leans. And not in a deliberate way. In a sagging way, like wet parchment held up by twine. You drop your tools near the hut. Not placed, not stored. Dropped. You don't care anymore. If they break, you'll fix them. If they disappear, you'll use your hands. Your fingers can't close properly. They stay curled, like they're still holding the hoe, even after it's gone. You have to pry them open with the other hand, and even that makes you wince. You're not injured, you're used. Inside the hut, the work continues. Your spouse, if you have one, is stirring something in a pot that's been boiling since last week. It's pottage again. It's always pottage. And the smell is more memory than flavour. You help with the fire. You gather the bowls. You shoo the goat out of the corner. You eat with one hand while rubbing your shoulder with the other. Dinner is a quiet affair. Not because you're solemn, but because talking requires breath, and you've used most of yours. The only sound is chewing, interrupted by the occasional grunt of discomfort as someone adjusts on the stool and discovers a new ache. After the meal, there's no winding down. There's mending to do, tools to sharpen, firewood to stack, a bit of cleaning, though nothing ever really gets clean. You check on the child, if yours survived, or someone else's, if you're responsible for them now. You tell them to sleep well, but you don't believe in sleep anymore. Not truly. You lie down on your straw mattress, every muscle still twitching from the day. You curl onto your side and try to avoid the lump in the middle. You're not sure if it's just straw or something alive. Your legs cramp. Your neck clicks. Your toes are still damp from that puddle in the field, and they'll be damp tomorrow. The cold comes in again, like it always does. It doesn't sneak. It declares itself, a slow, biting crawl that reminds you that comfort is fiction and warmth is a game of chance. Your joints throb like they've taken on lives of their own. Your skin itches where the fleas burrowed. Your teeth hum with quiet pain. Not from rot, not yet, but from the clenching you did all day without noticing. You don't sigh. That would be dramatic. You just close your eyes and hope your heart slows down enough to let you sleep before you have to do it all again. You were 25 this morning. You feel 70 now. And the worst part, no one will ever ask how your day went, because they already know. It was the same as theirs, and it will be the same tomorrow. Because in the Middle Ages, labour doesn't kill you all at once. It erases you slowly. You weren't taught your place. You were born into it. No one sat you down and explained how things worked. You learned the way animals learn, through correction, through being swatted down when you reach too high, through the sharp sting of being reminded that hope is not appropriate for people like you. You learned early that questions made people uncomfortable. Why can't we own land? Why don't they work? Why do we give them everything we grow? You asked once, when you were small enough to still believe answers were coming. Your father looked at you, then looked away, and said only, "That's the way of it." That was the last time you asked. You do not look your Lord in the eye, ever. You are not a man to him. You are function. You are labour. A crop in motion. A breathing asset. He rides past once in a while, on a horse that costs more than every hut in your village combined. You've never seen him dismount. His gloves are soft leather. His hands probably aren't even calloused. He wouldn't recognise the smell of manure if it was rubbed under his nose. Which, to be fair, someone once did. That someone vanished. The people say he was sent to work in the salt mines, but no one knows. That's how punishment works here. Not as justice, but as warning. You are taxed on what you grow, even if the crops fail. If your cow dies, the Lord still expects milk. If your roof collapses, he still expects rent. If your child is born sick, you still owe the church a baptism fee. You pay for the privilege of suffering. And when you fall behind, which you always do, you don't get help. You get judgment. The steward visits with a ledger and a smile that never quite reaches his eyes. He asks polite questions, like a man who enjoys watching people drown, but prefers they call it swimming. You once saw him inspect a widow's cellar. She had hidden a sack of grain for winter. He took it, said it violated the Lord's allotment. She cried. He wrote it down. She didn't survive the season. You've done everything right. You've followed every rule. You've bowed, obeyed, tithed, bled, worked through infection and injury and heartbreak. And still, you live in fear. Because in a world built on hierarchy, Your place is only safe if everyone above you agrees to let you stay. One rumour, one complaint, one mistake. That's all it takes. The priest says the meek shall inherit the earth. But you've dug into that earth with your bare hands. You've seen what's buried there. And none of it looks like an inheritance. Humiliation isn't a side effect. It's the system. It's not just that you're poor. It's that you're made to feel poor. Constantly. Publicly. It's in the way you're spoken to. Not with anger, but dismissal. You're not shouted at. You're ignored. Because shouting would imply you're worth the breath. It's in how you're summoned. Not by name, but with a whistle. Like a dog. Or by your profession. Boy, Miller, you there? You're referred to by what you do, not who you are. And it's in how your value is measured. Not in thoughts, or kindness, or effort, but in yield. How many sacks of grain? How many days worked without collapsing? How many tasks completed without asking for food? Your worth is not internal. It's weight and volume. Even your clothes betray you. A noble can wear wool and look dignified. You wear the same wool, and it labels you as common, rough, replaceable. Your tunic is patched in 5 places. One sleeve hangs longer than the other. The neckline was repaired with twine from a fishing net. It doesn't keep you warm. It barely keeps you decent. You walk past the Lord's manor and see their garments flapping on the line like flags from another world. Silks, linen, dyed fabrics with colours you've never worn and wouldn't dare touch. You once saw a servant drop a noble's robe into a puddle and get slapped so hard she bled. For a robe? A piece of cloth? You tore your tunic climbing a fence last year and didn't even notice until a stranger pointed it out. You still wear it. Of course you do. It's your only one. Church? Meant to be your refuge. Only reinforces the humiliation. The pews are divided. Nobles sit in the front. You sit in the back. You kneel longer, pray harder, give more, proportionally, than they ever will. But when the priest visits, he blesses their home first. Their wine is used in communion. Their bread goes to the altar. Their names are written in the book of the living. Yours? Not unless you pay for it. And even then, they spell it wrong. Confession is mandatory. You go every week. Not because you sinned, but because everyone sins. That's the rule. And if you say you haven't, they assume you're lying, which is worse. So you confess. You make things up. You say you had bad thoughts. You say you looked too long at someone's wife. The priest nods. He doesn't care. He just wants the tithe. And forgiveness. That's not free either. Even death doesn't erase your place in the hierarchy. The nobles get buried near the church, under stone markers with names and titles and prayers carved into marble. You get the outskirts, a shallow grave in soil that floods too easily. Maybe a wooden cross, if someone remembers. You won't be remembered for your deeds, you'll be remembered for your debts. Shame is baked into the routine. It's not an event, it's a schedule. You're shamed for how you walk. Too slow and you're lazy. Too fast and you're suspicious. You're shamed for how you talk. Too soft and you're timid. Too loud and you're insolent. You're shamed for how you eat. Too little and you're ungrateful. Too much and you're greedy. Even the way you stand can be wrong. You once leaned against a wall during prayer. The priest cleared his throat, loudly. You felt the eyes turn. You haven't leaned since. In the village square there's a post with chains. You pretend not to see it. You pretend it hasn't been used recently, but it has. Last week, a man was tied to it for speaking out against the steward. He wasn't beaten. That would have been merciful. He was left there, exposed. The punishment wasn't pain. It was observation. People passed him all day. They didn't speak. They didn't stare too long. That would be dangerous. But they saw him. They saw what happens. That was enough. You passed him too. You didn't nod. You didn't blink. You just kept walking. And later, when your own thoughts started to feel a little too sharp, you remembered him and dulled them down. That's how the system works. Not with terror, but with anticipation of it. You don't speak out. Not because you're afraid of what will happen, but because you've already seen what does. There's a word you've heard whispered. Sumptuary. It has something to do with clothes, with colours, with knowing your place through fabric. You once tried to wear a belt with a silver buckle. Not real silver. Just polished pewter. It caught the eye. That was the mistake. The steward saw. He asked where you got it. You said your cousin made it. He asked where your cousin got the pewter. You didn't know. The next morning, your cousin was fined. You lost the buckle, the belt. The cousin moved away. You still wear a rope now. Not for symbolism, for safety. Even laughter is monitored. You've learned to smile carefully, quietly. You don't laugh too loud in public, especially not near anyone in finer clothing. It's seen as disrespectful, like you're mocking joy you weren't given permission to feel. Happiness, here, is a resource. And like all resources, it's reserved for those at the top. Your joy is supposed to be modest, your sorrow silent. You become a master of quiet celebration. A warm stone in a pocket, a better than average loaf of bread, a night without rats. These are victories. You do not shout about them. You whisper them to yourself, like secrets. The public punishments vary, stocks, floggings, brandings, but humiliation is always the true sentence. A man who swears at a priest is shaved bald. A woman accused of gossip is made to wear a wooden bridle that locks her mouth open. You saw that once. Her tongue bled. People watched. Some laughed. Others looked away. You learned that silence is safety. You've kept your mouth closed ever since, even when you wanted to scream. At some point, you stopped noticing when you bowed. You just do it now. Reflex, like breathing. The motion is built into your spine, etched into your muscles. You bow before you register who you're bowing to. You bow to priests, to lords, to older boys who dress like they have authority. You've bowed to a scarecrow once. You laughed, then looked around to make sure no one saw. You were still afraid, because the fear doesn't go away. It evolves. It learns your routines. It puts on your clothes and walks beside you. Now, you're afraid of stepping out of line in ways you can't even define. You check your tone before you speak. Check your posture before you enter a room. Check your expressions when someone richer than you makes eye contact. You've become a self-policing system, a humiliation engine. You remember when you had thoughts, big, loud ones. You wanted things, to go places, to make something, to build something of your own. But the weight of this world doesn't just stop your legs. It presses down on your mind. Your dreams got smaller every year. They went from a house of my own to a roof that doesn't leak. From my own land to not being fine this week. From making art to sleeping through the night without waking up wet, cold or bitten. You don't hope anymore. You manage. There's an old man in the village. He doesn't speak much. His back is a question mark, and his eyes are always somewhere else. He's not mad. He's emptied. He used to sing. Now he hums tunelessly while he sharpens knives for no one. You watch him sometimes. Not with pity, with anticipation. Because that's your path. That's your reward for obedience. To grow old, bowed not just in body, but in soul. To be forgotten while still breathing. To be remembered only as someone who was quiet and didn't complain. And when you die, the burial will be quiet, quick. The priest will mutter a few words. The others will nod, not because they knew you, but because they knew a version of you. A role. A labourer. A name on the ledger. You'll be replaced before the week ends. Someone else will wear your shoes. Someone else will swing your hoe, and the hierarchy will go on. Smooth, untouched, unbothered by your absence. You are 25, but you are not young. You are not rising. You are not climbing. You are not waiting for your chance. You are settled, pinned, pressed. You are what they want you to be. Bent, grateful, silent. Your whole life is defined by what you're told not to do. Don't speak too much. Don't work on feast days. But don't rest too easily either. Don't look directly at the noble's daughter. Don't use your left hand for blessings. Don't forget to bow when the bell rings. You do all these things not because you understand them, but because everyone else does. Because someone long ago said it mattered. So now it matters. And if you forget, they say a spirit might follow you home. Or worse, the priest might. You were baptized before you could walk. Confirmed before you could read. You've never seen the Bible outside the church. And even if you did, you couldn't read it. Not that reading is encouraged. You are told the written word is for those called to it, and you are called to labour. When someone does learn to read, they don't brag. They whisper it like a confession, because curiosity is close to pride, and pride, of course, is a sin. You remember once, when you were young, asking why a child died in a next village. Because God called him home, your mother said. Was he bad? No, just needed somewhere else. Couldn't God ask? She slapped you. Not hard. Just enough to remind you. Questions are dangerous. That's when you stopped asking. The holidays are supposed to bring relief. Saint days, festivals, holy feasts. You look forward to them? Like you'd look forward to a warm fire or dry socks. But they're never what you hoped. The holy days come with their own rules, rituals, and expectations. Fast first, wash everything, stay up through the vigil. Don't speak too loud. Bring the right offering. Say the right words. Light the right candle at the right time, or you'll curse the harvest. And if something goes wrong that week, a rotten barrel, a sick cow, a stillborn baby, someone will remember what you forgot. And they'll blame you. You've watched processions go by. Torches, incense, droning chants echoing off the stones. You've followed them, sung along, held the candle until it burned your hand, bowed so long your legs went numb. And after you returned home, and nothing changed, except your back ached a little more. And your pottage was colder than usual, but no one complains. Because belief isn't about results, it's about obedience. You have a crucifix on your wall, though no one remembers who carved it. The face of Christ is uneven. His eyes follow you, not gently, judging. It watches you eat, work, sleep. You cover it sometimes when you sin, even if that sin is just thinking too hard about not going to mass because your knee is swollen and your shoes are broken. You don't cover it out of guilt. You cover it out of terror, because what if he sees? What if he hears you doubt? What if the roof caves in and it was because of your thoughts? The priest says God knows everything, every secret, every shame. Every time you turned away from duty, or looked with envy, or longed for a better life. So you confess things you didn't do, just to be safe. You say you coveted. You say you cursed under your breath. You say you were prideful, even when you weren't. Because if you forget a sin and don't confess it, they say it counts double. Better to be guilty of everything than risk missing something. The church teaches you to see yourself as low, humble, base. They say the meek shall inherit the earth, but that never meant land. It meant dirt. You were taught to crave humility like others crave power, to wear suffering like a badge, to compete not for glory, but for who can endure the most without complaint. Someone once lost a child and said, "It must be God's plan." And everyone nodded, and you wanted to scream. But instead you said, "Amen." Because what else could you say? Your community believes together. You're not alone in your fear. Everyone lives under the same sky of punishment. But belief doesn't unite you. It separates you in quiet ways. The devout are watched more closely. The cheerful are suspected of pride. The quiet ones are safe until they aren't. And the moment something bad happens, a fever, a bad harvest, a stillbirth, everyone looks for the weak link. Someone didn't pray hard enough. Someone didn't pay their tithe. Someone forgot the Saint's Day candle. Someone always deserves it. And the worst part? Sometimes that someone is you. You once saw a man speak back to the priest. Not angrily, just a question. A real question. Something about why some people suffer more than others if God loves all his children. The priest's face didn't change. But the next week, that man wasn't invited to communion. His wife stopped being spoken to at the well. His daughter didn't get picked for the May dance. No one hurt him, they just erased him. And you saw how quickly it could happen. So now you keep your head down. You speak when spoken to. You give thanks for rotten turnips. You call illness a test. You call starvation a gift. You call your slow destruction divine timing. Because here, culture isn't celebration. It's survival. Belief here isn't personal. It's social. It's public. It's performed. You don't believe louder to feel closer to God. You believe louder so no one thinks you're slipping. Because in a place like this, nothing is more dangerous than doubt. Doubt spreads. It questions. It whispers. And whispers are louder than shouts in the right corners. So the ones who fear the most become the most devout. The ones who are hungry give more. The ones who suffer pray harder. The ones who've lost everything show up to every mass, front row, hands folded like saints. Because what else can they do? If God isn't punishing them for sin, then he's punishing them for nothing. And that thought is worse than guilt. You've caught yourself judging. You didn't want to, but it crept in. The woman who stopped coming to prayer after her husband died. You told someone it was probably grief, but you also added, still she should be careful. People are starting to talk. And you were one of the people talking. The boy who walks strangely, never speaks? You once left a piece of bread by his door, and someone saw. They asked if you were encouraging him. You said no. You took the bread back that night. You hated yourself for it, but not enough to stop. Because kindness isn't free here. It's suspicious. There's no room for private belief. You must attend Mass. You must display your obedience. You must stand when told, kneel when told, and keep your face still even when the priest says something that makes no sense. If you frown too long, someone might think you're questioning. If you smile at the wrong time, someone might think you're mocking. If you stay silent, someone might think you're hiding something. The only safe emotion here is solemn gratitude. And even that, if expressed too loudly, looks prideful. Festivals and rites are opportunities to both belong and be exiled. You dance in a circle on St. Days, not because you want to, but because the people who don't are remembered. The old man who sat out last year is still whispered about. His crops failed afterward. The two things are linked now, whether they are or not. Belief here isn't about truth. It's about pattern. And once a pattern forms, no one breaks it. You once found a charm buried near your doorstep. Bone, wrapped in black thread. You don't believe in magic, but you burned it. Fast, quietly. You said a prayer, just in case. Because belief isn't only what you say aloud, it's the ritual under your breath. The tiny reflexes that give you away. There's a word they use often, humility. You've heard it more than your own name. It's said like a compliment, but you've come to understand it means something else entirely. It means submission. It means knowing your place. You are praised for being humble when you say nothing, when you take blame, when you accept pain without asking why. They say pride was the first sin, that the devil himself was cast down for thinking too highly of himself. So now, even confidence is dangerous. You don't speak of your skills. You don't take credit. You don't say, I did well. You say, I was lucky. You don't say, I worked hard. You say, God granted me strength. And if you forget and speak too boldly, you're reminded, through silence, or stares, or a whispered prayer offered for your soul, that pride goes before the fall. You once had a moment of clarity, brief, bright. You were helping repair the chapel roof, up above the world, sunlight in your eyes. You paused, took a breath, felt strong, capable, and immediately you felt shame, because you felt good. And here, feeling good without permission is its own kind of sin. So you mumbled a prayer for forgiveness, climbed down, kept your eyes low. The church teaches that this life is suffering, that joy is fleeting, that comfort is dangerous. You have to earn the afterlife through endurance, through patience, through carrying your cross. You've never seen a cross up close, but you know the weight of things, of expectations, of guilt, and in a way, you carry yours every day, not wooden, but invisible, not nailed, but woven into your breath. You wake up under it, you walk with it, you go to sleep still holding it. You've seen people fall apart quietly, not from starvation, not from wounds, but from belief. There was a woman who lost 3 children in one winter. Fever. Cold. The priest said it was a test of faith. She tried, she fasted, prayed until her voice cracked, walked barefoot in the snow to the shrine and back. Then one day she stopped speaking. Now she sits by the well, staring at the sky. People say she's blessed, that she sees angels, but you've seen her face. She doesn't see anything anymore. She was too devout to break the rules, so the rules broke her. There was a time you hoped, you don't remember when, maybe as a child, before your first funeral, before your first winter, before the fields took your innocence, one blister at a time. But at some point, that stopped. Now belief is your only shield, your only language. You can't name your fears without it. You can't explain your choices. Why didn't you run away? Why do you keep working? Why do you kneel? Why do you say thank you when you've been given nothing? Because you believe. Because if you don't, none of this means anything. And that's worse than the pain. The idea that your suffering is just suffering, that it isn't watched, weighed, redeemed, that makes it unbearable. So you believe, you choose to, you cling to it, even when it burns. You don't believe for salvation anymore. That part faded. You believe for survival. You believe that if you fast, your child won't die. That if you confess, the fever will break. That if you pray long enough, the plague won't come back. None of it has worked so far. But maybe you didn't do it right. Maybe you weren't humble enough. That's the hook. That's the chain. The belief that it's your fault if grace doesn't come. You see others lose faith, but never fully. It just frays, thins, becomes something else. You see them still go through the motions, still attend mass, still recite the words, but their eyes are vacant, their posture looser. They go not to feel holy, but to be seen being holy, because that's safer. You tell yourself you're not like them, but some days you are. Some days you repeat the prayers without listening. You mouth the words while thinking about chores. You forget to kneel at the right time and catch yourself halfway through. And when that happens, you feel panic, not because God saw, but because someone else might have. The priest once said that suffering purifies the soul, that those who suffer most in this life will be closest to God in the next. You didn't cry when he said that. You didn't cry, but you looked at your mother's hands, warped, trembling, calloused like bark, and you thought, then she must be a saint already. But she never called herself that. She just said, be good, not happy, not hopeful, just good. Good, so you wouldn't be noticed. Good, so you'd survive long enough to become invisible. Belief used to be about heaven. Now, it's about not being alone. Because everyone you know believes, or pretends to, or needs to. And if you stopped, really stopped, you'd be cut off, exiled, unseen. Like the old man who laughed during prayer once, and now lives in the woods, speaking to birds. People say he's mad, but you wonder if he just broke through. You don't envy him, not really, but you do think about him, more than you should. Faith was once your comfort. Now it's your cage, but it's a beautiful one. Carved, familiar, etched with songs and saints and holy days that tell you your pain is worth something. And as long as that remains true, you can keep going. You can believe. Because if you didn't, then this would all be for nothing. There's a moment, sometime around 25, when your body stops being yours. It becomes a riddle, a set of symptoms, a collection of aches and oddities that don't add up. You wake up with pain in your foot, though you didn't walk on it yesterday. Your gums bleed without warning. Your eye twitches for an hour straight, then stops just when you mention it to someone else. You're not sick. You're simply alive. In the Middle Ages. People talk about death like weather here. Casual, constant, accepted. But it's the slow unspooling that truly defines you. The living rot, the body unravelling thread by thread, and no one even blinks. You get a splinter. You try to ignore it. The skin around it swells. It turns red, then purple. You press on it and yellow fluid leaks out. The next day, you can't bend your finger. The next week, you can't feel your arm. Then you collapse while tying your shoe. Everyone says, he must have been weak. No one blames the splinter, because infection isn't a bug here. It's a neighbour. Teeth? You remember teeth. Once. They used to line up. Now they lean. They wobble. They ache when the air is cold or hot or exists. You chew on one side and hope for the best. One falls out while you're rinsing your mouth in the river. You don't even flinch. Toothache is just part of life. Like taxes. Like smoke. Like fleas. Fleas, they are everywhere. You scratch in your sleep. You scratch until you bleed. You've picked a flea out of your eyelid. You've woken up with bites in a perfect circle across your thigh, like they threw a party and left you the decorations. Your clothes are washed in the river. Sometimes. But nothing helps. They always come back. They live in the straw. In the seams. In your hair. In the dog's hair. In your child's cradle. You once watched a flea hop from your wrist to your neighbour's cheek. You both saw it. You said nothing. Because that's just how it is. You haven't seen a doctor. There aren't really doctors. Not for people like you. There's the barber who cuts hair and boils knives. He also lances boils, pulls teeth, and drains bad humours. His tools clink like silverware at a funeral. You only go to him if the pain is unbearable, or if the swelling looks unholy. You once watched him slice into a man's back with a blade that looked more rust than metal. Said he had too much bile. A goat was tied nearby. It was unclear if the goat was involved. The man screamed once, then went quiet. He lived, for a while. You've been bled, once, for dizziness. They said your blood was imbalanced, so they opened your arm. You fainted. When you woke up, you felt worse. They call that proof it worked. You've known people who were bled for toothaches, for sadness, for impure thoughts. One woman was bled weekly for wandering womb. She died before her womb could explain itself. Sometimes a neighbour gets a rash. It spreads. The skin cracks, blackens. They say it's God's anger, or bad wind. You wrap your mouth in cloth when you go near. Not because it helps, but because doing something feels better than doing nothing. Once, your cousin's leg turned green. She swore it felt warm. Then she stopped walking. Then she stopped waking. They buried her in lime and whispered the Lord's name. You haven't said her name since. The absurdity doesn't come from the pain. It comes from the answers. You're told to wear amulets, boil mint leaves, bury coins under the threshold, drink wine mixed with crushed beetles. You've done all of it, even the beetles. Because when your stomach hurts for the third day in a row, and you haven't kept anything down except river water, logic stops being helpful. Superstition is more comforting than silence. You had a wart once, on your neck. A woman told you to rub it with a dead mole. You did. It didn't help. But a wart disappeared eventually. Maybe the mole worked. Maybe it died of embarrassment. You've seen a man walk backward around the chapel 7 times to cure insomnia. You've seen a priest wave incense over a pig and declare it absolved before slaughter. You've seen a mother give her child to a travelling monk for blessing, and the child came back with a fever. The monk didn't come back at all. This is medicine. This is belief. This is what you get when rot outpaces reason. There was a boy who laughed too much. That was all. Just laughter. Loud, high-pitched, sudden, in church, at funerals, during storms. They said he had spirits in his lungs, that the laughter wasn't his. They made him fast for a week. When he kept laughing, they tied him to the altar rail and left him overnight. By morning, he wasn't laughing anymore, but he also never looked anyone in the eye again. Sometimes it's not laughter. Sometimes it's a stillness. You knew a man who stopped talking. Just stopped. Not because he forgot how, but because the words no longer fit in his mouth. He still worked, still prayed, still bowed at the right times. But if someone asked him a question, he stared like they were made of smoke. He was harmless, so they let him be. Called him Touched. Gave him a nickname instead of a name. But when a storm hit and 3 sheep drowned in the lower field, someone said he brought it. That his silence was a curse. That God was angry because of him. So they drove him out. Not cruelly, just with silence. Like steam escaping a room. He vanished. Sometimes you think you see him by the edge of the woods. You don't say anything, because silence here can spread. There's no such thing as privacy. Not in madness, not in grief, not in confusion. If you speak to yourself too loudly, someone will hear. If you rock back and forth, someone will notice. If you stare too long at the fire, someone will tell the priest. You've learned to do your unravelling quietly, at night, in corners, with your back turned. Women suffer differently. When a man talks to himself, they say he's burdened. When a woman does, they say she's a witch. You've seen women accused of sorcery because they wept after childbirth, because they saw colours in the sky, because their milk didn't come in fast enough. One young girl refused to eat after her brother died. She sat by the river and stared at the current. They said she had unnatural grief, that her soul had wandered. They tied her wrists with wool and made her carry a candle to the altar every morning for 30 days. On day 31, she was gone. The candle remained. The horror isn't the madness itself, it's that it's normal, expected, part of the landscape. People bend, break, disappear. No one's shocked, no one gasps. They just cross themselves, move on. Patch the hole with gossip. You ask what happened to someone, and the answer is always vague. They saw something. They couldn't sleep. They had too many thoughts. Too many thoughts. As if thinking too much were a sickness. Maybe it is. Here, you guard your mind the way others guard their chickens. Not for profit, for survival. You don't write anything down. You don't ask questions twice. You don't daydream near others. Because the difference between a poet and a heretic is who's watching. You've seen the way people look at a limp, at a twisted hand, at a crooked spine. They stare, but not with sympathy, with caution, as if deformity were contagious, as if the body's betrayal might leap from skin to skin like a sneeze. A man with a hunch back walks the long way around the church. No one told him to, he just knows. Children don't play near him. Dogs bark at him more. The baker gives him yesterday's bread, always yesterday's. No one says he's cursed, but no one touches him either. You once saw a man lose 3 fingers to a blade in the mill. He screamed, clutched a stump, bled all over the ground. They wrapped it in cloth and ash, gave him strong ale, told him to bite down on a stick. By the next week, he was back in the fields, still working with the other hand, because rest isn't an option. Not even for the injured. Not even for the dying. He didn't cry after that. Not because it didn't hurt. Because pain, here, is boring. No one pities pain they can't feel. You've seen burns, crushed legs, faces half gone from boils that burst and left caverns behind. You've seen noses missing, eyes gone milky, fingers curled in on themselves like worms. And all of them, all these people, keep going, because stopping would mean starving. So they walk into the square, into the chapel, into the market, wearing their wounds like they're part of the uniform. And no one stares too long, because next week it might be you. Children are born wrong sometimes, bent, silent, missing something. Most don't live long. The ones who do are watched carefully. One girl was born with 6 toes on each foot. They called her twice blessed at first, until a cow died when she touched it. Then they called her marked. She lives at the edge of the village now, still alive, but not quite included. People give her things, then walk away fast. You've done it too. You hate yourself a little, but you still do it. Because being kind here has consequences. The first time you saw a man cough blood into his hand and lick it off, you flinched. The second time you looked away. The third time you didn't notice. It's not that you've become cruel, it's that you've become calibrated. What once made you sick now barely registers. You have a quota of horror, and you've met it. Daily. For years. Now you can walk past wounds without blinking. Step over a dying dog. Nod politely to a woman with no jaw. You tell yourself you're strong, but really you're just dulled. You've adapted. You've seen a man eat clay to fill his belly. He smiled when he found it. A clean patch, soft, damp, easy to swallow. You watched him eat like it was bread. No one stopped him. Someone even said, "Save me a bit if there's more." You laughed. Then you checked your shoes for good clay. There's a man with one eye and no teeth who sings to himself while gathering moss off trees. He believes it keeps demons away. You don't laugh anymore. You ask him where the softest moss is. The absurdity isn't funny here. Not really. It's ritual. Coping. Echoes of logic in a world that stopped making sense the moment you were born into it. You use pig fat as medicine, urine as cleaning solution, ash to brush your teeth. You catch lice and flick them into the fire. You boil river water and call it soup. And when something smells wrong, truly wrong, like death without the courtesy of distance, you just breathe through your mouth and keep working. Because someone has to. There was a boy once, new, from another village. He cried when he saw the state of the latrines. He gagged at the food. He whispered to someone that he thought this place was cursed. He didn't last a week. Not because anyone hurt him, because he wouldn't eat, wouldn't wash, wouldn't stop crying. His body left quietly. No one marked the grave. You didn't go to the burial. You were busy with the cows. But that night, you laid in bed and thought, why did he cry so much? Then you realised he was the sane one. You're the one who adapted. You used to be disgusted. Used to flinch, gag, wince, shake, pray for change. But the filth stayed. The rot deepened. The body failed. And the world remained. So you learned to live in it. Not as a victim, not as a fighter, just as something that endures. And now you are 25. And you are not whole. You are not strong. You are not clean. You are a walking contradiction. Alive, but decomposing. Awake, but dreaming of numbness. You have survived what others couldn't, but you don't remember what it cost. And that, perhaps, is the most absurd part of all. There's a kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. It's not the ache in your back or the burn behind your eyes. It's not your feet, raw from years of stone and straw. It's something deeper. A weariness in the bones of your thoughts. You're 25, and you feel like you've already lived 3 lives. Not grand ones. Not full of story or battle or fame. Just long and dull and heavy. You wake up not to start a new day, but to continue the last one. Because they never really end here. Just pause while you sleep. Then resume with the same hunger, the same cold, the same repetition. Time stopped meaning anything years ago. The calendar is written in firewood, in the size of turnips, in the length of night, in the lines across your knuckles that weren't there last year, or were. You don't know anymore. You used to have a name that felt like it belonged to you. Now, it's a sound people make when they need something. Water, help, quiet, a body to bury. You've been called by the wrong name before, and you didn't correct them. Not because it didn't matter, but because in that moment, you weren't sure they were wrong. You don't see yourself clearly. Not in mirrors, there are none. Only in puddles and polished metal. Warped reflections. Flickers of someone you used to recognise. Now when you catch your face in water, it looks like someone else. Not older, not stranger, just distant. Like a story half remembered. There was a time you thought of the future. Briefly, you imagined travel, a better house, a softer life. You didn't ask for wealth, just fewer cracks in the roof, fewer funerals. But the future here is a whisper, soft, small, and hard to hear over the noise of now. So you stop thinking about it. You still cry. Sometimes, quietly, in moments no one sees. But it's not a sob. It's not a release. It's just liquid leaving the body. Like sweat. Like breath. You've become so good at holding things in that letting go feels foreign. Your birthday passed last month. No one said anything. You didn't either. Not because you were humble. Because you forgot. You only remembered 3 days later, when someone mentioned the saint whose day you share. You were 25. But you didn't feel it. You didn't feel anything. Except maybe embarrassment that you'd remembered. You used to look forward to things. Bread days, candle nights, midwinter songs. Now you dread them. Not because they're bad. Because they interrupt the quiet. Because they remind you of what used to be light and is now just noise. Your dreams are dull now. Not surreal or fantastic. Just chores you haven't done. Tasks that replay in sleep. You wake up exhausted from living twice. Sometimes you dream of food. Not feasts. Just bread. A soft piece. Still warm. You bite into it. And wake up chewing on your blanket. There's a numbness that spreads when nothing changes. When every day is another layer of the same dust. You forget who died last winter. Was it your uncle? Your neighbour? You forget which of your siblings are still alive. You forget how many teeth you've lost. You forget what your voice used to sound like before it grew hoarse with cold. You forget the last time someone asked how you were and meant it. You once saw a child playing in the mud, laughing, face covered in dirt and light and noise, and it made you angry. Not because of the mess, but because you couldn't remember the last time you felt that way. Not even when you were a child. You must have laughed once, but when? And why? The longer you live, the less you feel like a person. You become a function, a task doer, a roof fixer, a body that carries water, a set of hands and silence. And you wonder, if you vanished tomorrow, would anyone notice? Would they remember your face, or just your usefulness? Sometimes, in your rarest moments alone, you whisper your own name, just to hear it out loud, just to remind yourself you still exist outside someone else's need. It sounds strange now, like a myth, or a mistake. You used to love people. That's the part you forget most. You used to feel full in a room. The chatter, the warmth, the sounds of hands working beside yours. They meant something. They held you up. Now people just take space. They ask questions. They hand you things. They cough too loud. Their grief is too messy. Their joy too bright. You don't resent them. You just don't want to be near them. Even the ones you love. Especially the ones you love. Because love here is heavy. It's just a future loss in disguise. You can't love someone without also preparing to bury them. You've done it before. You've stood in a room where someone used to be. And it's not just the silence that aches. It's the way the room rearranges itself. Like it was never meant to hold them. Like it already forgot. So you start to forget too, just to keep pace. You talk less now. Not because you have secrets. Just because words take effort. Because when everything is the same, there's nothing to say. How are you? Still here? How's the weather? Same as yesterday. What hurts? Everything. People ask anyway, out of habit, out of politeness. You answer because that's easier than silence. But you don't mean any of it. They don't either. You once knew someone who could make people laugh just by raising an eyebrow. She's dead now. You think about her sometimes. Not what she said, not how she looked, just the shape of the noise she made, the way a room softened when she walked in. That softening hasn't returned. You used to have crushes. That word feels absurd now. You used to think about your smile, how you stood, how you smelled. Now, you think about not limping in front of others, about hiding the missing tooth, about breathing quiet so no one knows the cough is back. You don't flirt. You nod. You avoid eye contact. You don't invite closeness, because closeness means someone else who can die. You tried once to connect again, sat next to someone at dusk and asked what they missed most. And they said, "Fresh bread." You said, "Me too." That was it. You sat together for another hour and didn't speak again. But it was the warmest moment you'd had in months. You tell yourself stories sometimes, quietly, in your head. Not real ones, just fragments. A memory you aren't sure happened. A face you might have invented. A season that felt less cold than this one, though it probably wasn't. You do it to stay anchored. But the stories keep slipping. One week, you forgot your mother's voice. You tried to hear it, but all you got was the echo of her hands. How they moved. How they peeled potatoes. How they brushed crumbs off her lap. But the sound was gone, like a song hummed too soft for too long. You whispered her name. Just once. But it didn't help. It sounded like a stranger's. You think that's what death really is. Not silence, but forgetting. When people stop remembering your laugh, your walk, the way you swore when you stubbed your toe, and you're already disappearing from yourself. There's someone who calls you friend. They say it softly, like they're not sure either. You try to smile, but even the act of smiling feels theatrical now, like a motion you've borrowed from someone else. You wonder what they mean by it. Friend. Is it just that you still exist? That you haven't left? Here, survival is the new intimacy. If you both woke up again today, that's closeness. There are no mirrors, so you study yourself in others. In their eyes when you speak. In their flinches. Their nods. Their indifference. It tells you who you are now, or who they think you are. And on the rare occasion someone touches your arm, or your back, or your shoulder in passing, it stays with you. Not like love, not like affection, just proof. Proof you're still physically here, that you haven't become completely transparent. You used to fear dying. Now you fear outlasting the things that made you feel alive. You've outlived people, seasons, familiar jokes, stories told by the fire. One man used to recite poems from memory, not well, but passionately. You rolled your eyes at him. Now you'd give anything to hear him get it wrong again. He died 3 winters ago, and with him went the last poem in the village. You don't keep track of the days anymore. What would be the point? The sun rises, the bread bakes, the ache settles in the ribs. The world doesn't change. Only people vanish. Sometimes slowly, sometimes fast, but always eventually. You used to think you'd want more time. Now you're not sure. Not because you want to die, not exactly, but because you don't want more of this. More hunger, more cold, more funerals, more of the same sky, grey and unmoved. More of your own hands cracking in the same places every winter. If you could be promised something else, even nothing, you might take it. Because here the worst part isn't pain, it's the repeat of pain, the echo, the knowledge that tomorrow will hurt in the same shape, just slightly louder. You have reached the part of your life where anticipation no longer exists. You don't wait for things, you just endure them. There are no endings here, only fade-outs. People don't go in fire and glory, they go in coughs, in limps, in slowed speech and shallower breath. They go by becoming quieter versions of themselves until they're more memory than person. And even memory here gets washed away with the next rain. You've seen it happen. You've watched people you knew become names you barely remember. You've spoken those names aloud and heard the sound fall flat. You wonder who's next. Sometimes you hope it's you, not because you hate life, but because you've already lived it. At 25, you've had your beginning, your middle, and whatever this is now. You don't feel cheated. You feel used. Used up. There's a silence you crave more than rest. It's not sleep, not peace. It's erasure. The idea that one day you might stop aching without anyone noticing. That you'll be able to disappear into the soil without ceremony, without noise, without a legacy. Not because you don't deserve one, but because you're too tired to carry even that. You've watched the wind blow away whole stories, families, songs, villages. No monuments, no records, just gone. And you think, maybe that's the kindest kind of ending. Sometimes at night, you imagine being small again. Not young, small. So small that no one notices you. So small you fit between the cracks of this world. You wouldn't need food, or warmth, or grief. You could live in the seam of a stone and just be. No more explaining yourself. No more bracing for pain. Just a stillness that feels like safety. You used to think survival was the goal. Now you think maybe disappearance is gentler. You've stopped looking forward. You don't mark the next festival, the next planting, the next anything. You live in the thick soup of now, stirred just enough to keep from burning, but never served. Time passes, but it doesn't move. You've had days when your body didn't want to stand, when your hands wouldn't unclench, when your mouth wouldn't open to form the word yes, or no, or help. And no one noticed. And that was the worst part. Not that you were slipping, but that your absence made no noise. You began to wonder if you were ever here at all. You start to dream of places that don't exist. Rooms with warmth. Voices that ask you questions. A future that doesn't feel like a punishment. But when you wake, you don't curse the dream for being false. You thank it. Because for a few hours, your mind forgot where you were, who you were, that you were 25, and that here, 25, is the final chapter, not the prologue. You don't want a grave. You don't want a marker. You want to be mistaken for moss. For a stone someone trips over. For a gust of wind that means nothing, because meaning here is just more weight. And you've carried enough. You've never been dramatic. You've never shouted. You've never made demands. So you don't want your end to echo. You don't want people to cry. You just want to vanish so gently that no one even realises you're gone until the bread bakes wrong and the chickens don't come out of the coop. And someone squints at the sky and says, "Wasn't there someone who used to?" Then stops and goes back to their task. That would be okay. That would be enough. No more words, no more names. Just the quiet shape of your breath in the dark. A roof that doesn't leak tonight. A fire that crackles low enough not to need tending. The wind pressing gently against the wall, as if it too has grown tired of moving. You've lived a long life, even if it was short, even if it didn't feel like a story, just a stretch of dirt and hunger and names you forgot too soon. It's okay now. You don't need to remember all of it. You only need to rest. And let the silence carry the rest of you out. Like smoke from the last candle. Like the slow curl of steam rising from a bowl left untouched. Sleep. Let the weight drop. Let it all go. You're done.